the show starts. Bill, why do you have a stack of toy dinosaurs? Is that for your kid in the background or what?
No. I've actually put them high enough on the shelf so my kid can't get them because they're collectibles.
So you don't let your kid play with those rubber toys that you have the fun educational mind stimulating toys for your child that makes
those are
them
not
grow?
for playing. Those dinosaurs are for admiring only.
So if they're collectibles, are those from the 60s and 50s?
80s.
So do they have lead in them?
No.
No?
I don't know.
It's a California thing to say.
I haven't tasted them.
You haven't tasted them?
I don't think they have lead in them.
No.
But hey, let's not talk about dinosaurs. Let's get right into this. Welcome, everybody, to the HVAC Overtime Show. If you didn't know you were watching this, you are watching this because you clicked a little link, and now you're here watching us. So, first off, let's say hi to my favorite little guy, Randy, and his little buddy, Luke, tonight. I'm sure he's watching eagerly. And tonight we have a super special guest, Mr. Alex Meaney, who I recently found out before my show is actually my older brother, as you can tell by the sweet haircut and the beard.
It's weird. That must be an older picture on the thumbnail, huh?
Yeah.
Oh, let's not get into that.
I think you should.
When I was co-starring in Heroes.
Thank God you knew.
Hey, I'm gonna throw this out there. Does anybody in the chat know who that is in the thumbnail that I made? I don't think anybody.
Alex actually knew. Here, let me tell them the story.
Surprised.
So Bill always comes up with a thumbnail, and then he sends it over, and he's like, "Post this up." So he sent it, and then he doesn't respond a lot during the day. So I sent him a message. I'm like, "I'm pretty sure that's not Alex," and he didn't say anything. And Joe's like, "Yeah, I don't think it's Alex." So I emailed it to Alex. I'm like, "Is this you?" And he's like, "No, it seems like it's TV star blah blah so." And he knew who it was right away.
Okay. Yep. So why do you say that, Adam? Why do you tell me? You kept me on my edge of my seat. I thought he was gonna get pissed.
Well, I didn't know if you were gonna use it or not.
I didn't even know what Alex looks like, but I knew that wasn't him.
You're funny.
That's such a nice clear headshot. Like, hey, I'm having fun in this picture. That's not that guy.
The best was Nate Adams posted in the Facebook group. He's like, "Wow, Alex shaved." He's like, "I can't believe it."
I kind of think Nate's serious.
Yeah, I doubt it. I've met Nate a few times. I think he knows the difference.
Yeah, you're probably right. Maybe
Bill
a younger version of you.
Is super creative with his thumbnails, and he always likes to jab us. Bill, I don't even think I got to ask you, Bill. So the last show that you didn't make it, you put a Star Trek thumbnail out there.
Love it.
We all talked about it, right? Did you mean to do something with that thumbnail? Did you have intentions when you posted that?
No.
Okay, because the way that I looked at it, you basically had the number 2, the number 3, and the number 4 in the hierarchy of Star Trek in that picture, kind of like you were insinuating you were the captain.
Because you weren't on the show that week.
You weren't on the show.
Oh, you guys are digging deep in this stuff.
I really thought you meant to do that.
You want to know what I'm doing when I'm making these thumbnails?
What are you doing?
I'm pooping.
That's true. That's true.
99% of the time.
Yeah.
That's the only time I get to myself.
Well,
lock myself in the John, and I'm like, I gotta make this in 47 seconds because I eat a lot of mini muesli now, so that's all the time I got.
Oh man, you better be careful, dude. You're gonna end up like me with a bunch of stories, so you gotta be careful with that stuff.
Oh no, I timed it. I got it timed now.
You got it timed.
You take Metamucil at 5 o'clock in the morning, 10 o'clock you go, and that's it. You're good to go the rest of the day.
What happens if you're sitting in traffic, bro?
Oh, guys! Before we scare them away, like I almost did before the show.
Yeah, let's not relive those.
Let's not go there.
I was warned that this was a highbrow sort of encounter.
Yeah,
I don't want you to get nervous.
Wait, what are people saying out there?
Don't get nervous, okay? Just be yourself.
Yeah.
Just be yourself, all right? We put our pants on one leg at a time, just like the rest of humanity.
No need to be intimidated by you.
No. I mean, I'll sign some stuff after the show if you want. No big deal.
Anybody that comes on the show, like I said, they get huge after. Huge. But why don't we tell people who you are, Alex, first, for the people that don't know who you are?
So I am or have been the senior trainer for RightSoft for about 15 years and working for the company for about 18. So I go around teaching people how to do manual J, manual D, manual S, manual T, all that kind of stuff, while showing them how to do it with our software. I also work with the ACCA. Actually, so we did like about a half an hour of well, I don't know if you'd call it prep, but pre-interview stuff before we started here. Totally forgot to mention this to them, so they have no idea. There's a new edition of the Manual S coming out, which is the standard for how to select equipment. And because of my role at RightSoft, I was able to sit on the committee that wrote that. So I got to contribute a lot to that, and that's entering its review stages. Like right now, they're putting it out for public comment.
So let's dumb this down even more than what we've already said. What is RightSoft, and what is the purpose of RightSoft? What are you trying to do with this software? It's
an HVAC design software that's based on a drawing, so you don't have to put up with spreadsheet kind of BS.
Gotcha.
So you can draw out you can actually see it behind me.
Yeah.
You can draw out the footprint of a house, and that will pull all of the wall material, ceiling material, floor material, square footages, windows, doors, all that crap. Organize it into a nice, neat little spreadsheet that you never have to look at, and do all the math. Fill out the tax form, come up with how many BTUs you need, so you can pick your. I hate to say pick your tonnage, because it's much more nuanced than that, and there's no such thing as a friggin' ton, and it makes me angry. But that's how most people look at it, at least to start with. So they get the right sized unit, and then we also size the ductwork based on length of run, number of fittings, that kind of thing. So you're getting the appropriate amount of airflow instead of just using rule of thumb BS. We do lots of other stuff. We do residential, we do commercial, we do, but it's mostly load calculation and airflow. We've got a little bit of geothermal stuff, some in-floor radiant heating, other stuff, but that's the meat and potatoes.
So about, I'd say 10 years ago, again, I'm a commercial guy, so I do commercial refrigeration and air conditioning. I don't typically do new installations and stuff, but about 10 years ago, I had three different houses that I was helping family members out and friends out, where we did, AC replacements and stuff. And I purchased RightSoft, and I have to say, I'm assuming it's only gotten better since then, but it was very easy to use, at least for me back then. Not having a background, I just downloaded it, started playing with it. I was able to do a box load, and then you just built from there. And once you did it, and just start clicking the boxes, and it really wasn't too difficult. And I found it to be very eye-opening back then. And again, I'm sure the math has gotten even better, but I found it to be very eye-opening on what you would think that a house would need as far as the infiltration and all that stuff, and what you actually, once you measured and figured out the types of insulations and the R values and the U values of the windows and all that stuff, and what you actually needed. It was very eye-opening to see that. And
yeah, if you're a tech savvy individual, RightSoft is like a kid's toy.
Yeah, but it was very fun, actually.
I have to be very careful how I say that and who I say that to, because if you don't have a tech background, and you are now experiencing through one platform every tool that you use prior to RightSoft, somebody's learning all of those skills all at once, and they need to do a job by tomorrow. Yeah, and so
crash course.
Yeah. So there are a lot of people who are like, "Oh my God, RightSoft's so impossible." It's like, if you don't have a technical background, there are a lot of skills that you need to build up in order to get entry into it. But people in their 20s and 30s at this point who have played around with Photoshop and CAD and whatever else, and just tinkered with it, created graphics for a YouTube channel.
If you confuse your Game Boy with a phone, you probably shouldn't do it.
Yeah, well, no, it's not that you shouldn't do it, man, because anybody can learn how to do something. That's sort of my I don't have an HVAC background. I have a degree in English communications and philosophy.
Guys, how come we didn't discuss this before? I thought this guy knew about air conditioning. Okay.
I used the word super tech several times.
Bill Bill Wright, who founded Wrightsoft, tricked me into working for him as a temp 18 years ago.
Wow.
And I originally, prior to, very early in my life in college, I thought I wanted to be a teacher. And then I got into my first classroom and I washed out in 4 days. I was like, F this S, I'm out of here. It turns out I don't like children.
You could definitely swear on the show, just so you know.
Okay, well then fuck this shit. I don't like children.
we call them bastards.
Yeah. Yeah. And so I went in a different direction. And when I got to Wrightsoft, I saw that there was somebody who that's all they did was teach adults. And I was like, oh, I'd like to try to do that. And so I just wouldn't leave. Right. Like I just was looking for jobs. Anytime there was somebody needed to do something, I went and did it. And they eventually figured out that I'm very teachable, and I have a lot of patience. And so my job, we had a head of technical support, and dude was as mean as a snake. Bill, if you're out there somewhere, my apologies, but everybody hated this guy. He knew the answers, but nobody wanted to talk to him because he would just be, how dare you ask me a question? Like that kind of attitude.
Stupid bastard.
I sat through several hours of your mobile J training, the online videos, and I remember there was a part where somebody asked a question, I believe, about infiltration, and it was tight, average, leaky, whatever. And you asked the question to him. Was this what? I don't know if I'm recalling the story correctly. You're like, what does this actually mean? Average, tight. And he's like, if you don't know what that means, am I wrong about this?
No, keep going.
He wouldn't really answer you correctly. He's like, it's pretty obvious what average and tight and loose means. And it's like, well, how do you?
As in the question,
it's kind of an opinion. Yeah, Alex was asking one of the guys from Wrightsoft this question to define what these terms mean in the program.
No, it was actually it wasn't one of the guys at Wrightsoft.
Oh, okay.
One of the guys it was the guy at the ACCA.
Got it.
It's a guy by the name of Hank Ratowski. He wrote all of the manuals. And he's an interesting personality. He's known for being kind of mean. So that might be where you're picking that up. Different guy, but
Adam really gets his feelings hurt easily. So he's that sensitive figure.
Hank was and is, I think he still is. He's an older gentleman, but he is a super genius. I dared ask him a few questions like, why do you call it average if it's not the most common? Like, why are you using the terms tight, average, and loose if loose isn't that loose and average isn't the most common? And, we got into a little bit of a thing. But because that actually, we have to use those terms, right? For liability purposes. If it's in the book, it's going to be in the software the same way. So, otherwise, if we rename it, we're going to own the responsibility of like people selecting it. And it drives me nuts that they use terminology like that when somebody who had common sense would read it and they would, based on their common sense, pick the wrong thing. Right. Because a average building is like 5 air changes per hour. That exceeds code for a brand new friggin' building in like half the country right now. Average exceeds code for a brand new building. By the way, that's been the standard. That has been average for 20 damned years. So people choosing average, thinking like this is the most common, have been under. It's actually one of the big reasons why Nate Adams and I get into it all the time, because he's saying if you don't have a blower door, you can't do a load, and I'm like, pump the brakes. That's not 100% true, but he's got a point, because people are constantly effing up the infiltration load because the book is using somewhat vague terminology that is hard for us to clarify without like creating ownership of the problem.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
seems like a very
and Nate's not wrong.
line
Just
to
get a
walk.
blower door and that'll solve all the issues. But you can't make that the solution because, well, not everybody's going to do blower door testing on every job. That's nuts.
Oh, absolutely.
And like me, you buy a blower door and you don't really know how to use it, right?
I mean,
Adam, I need you to come do a blower
I hook
door
it up
test
to the
in my house,
bathroom, and yeah, I don't know. Yeah,
I want you to do
Which,
a blower door test on one room in my house.
what brand did you buy?
Retrotech.
Really?
Yep.
I mean, I found that one to be a really simple interface.
No, I'm just joking. I have
Adam's
it down. It's
a little
super.
bit
It's
special,
easy.
bro.
I'm just. Yeah, no. I'm good.
He's good.
I'm
He's
giving
very
myself a
good.
hard time.
He cut his teeth on blower doors at my house.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's true.
And we let it was like 0 degrees outside. And we let the blower door run for like 7 hours.
It dropped my house by I swear 30 degrees. It was 50 something by the time we were done.
That's why they always do negative pressure, by the way. The people who invented the blower door were in Canada. It was just too damn cold to blow it in. So everything's been designed for blowing it out for exhaust because it's too freaking cold to do it. Or where it was invented, it's too freaking cold to do it any other way.
Jerks.
So when it comes to RightSoft, again, forgive my ignorance, but as time is going on and technology is evolving and stuff, obviously a lot of people are using their smartphones for doing things. So do you guys have the ability? Do you guys have apps for the smartphone to do block load calculations and stuff?
Yep, we have we call it RightJ Mobile, and it's a block load tool that will run on your phone. We also have something called Right Mobile Consultant, which is a little bit of it's got a few more features, a few more bells and whistles. It does the whole Google Maps thing, which is kind of useful. But in order for it to be functional, we couldn't fit it on the phone and have it work the way we wanted. So it's got to be tablet or larger.
Okay. So does that still require? So you would do the block load, and then back at the office they would run all the crazy calculations. Is that how that works, or do they complete the whole load calculation?
No. It's done right there.
Okay.
It's cloud based, so it's like a web browser thing.
Got it.
It gives you your heating sensible latent. And it's kind of a real time thing. So you make changes and it updates. It's a very neat tool. It doesn't do you can't do the room by room thing with it. But I have found room by room calculations on a phone I don't think anybody's going to come up with a user interface that's going to make that palatable.
Just because of all the math and everything?
Just because this is not a very precise way of describing something that's got a lot of corners and angles and everything else.
Okay.
Right? They're I think the tool that's going to eventually invade the mobile space for room by room is going to be some kind of what do they call it? Not enhanced reality.
Like a 3D mapping kind of a thing?
Yeah. But Bosch is going to roll out something.
LiDAR or something.
Yeah. And they have tools like that, but right now they're for, much higher end uses and they're thousands of dollars worth of equipment. Somebody's going to be able to put it on a phone, and
we're talking technology.
My little vacuum runs around the house and uses LiDAR and maps your house out and gives you a general map of the house. So I could imagine you could do something like that with a phone eventually or something. And
I mean, that actually gets into some creepy territory where things may eventually go. Right.
Yeah.
The conversations have been had about being able to buy that data in order to create plans and calculations.
Wow.
I mean, for people out there that don't know, I mean, the amount of
and it's widely available too.
Oh yeah.
Wow.
That's a great idea.
That doesn't surprise me. I mean, that doesn't surprise me at all. The amount of data that is taken by Google and Apple or whatever. I mean, it's very useful.
Yeah.
Whether or not you like it or not, it's very useful. I mean, you targeted ads and all kinds of stuff. It's kind of a trip.
What do you see now as far as, do you ever look at other people's loads, or do you ever look at somebody's load that they ran that they're having an issue with? It's either being oversized or undersized. What is
all the time
biggest mistake?
Duct load. Always.
Really?
Duct load or
What do you mean? Duct load?
So the duct location and quality is a setting in everybody's software so it's weird. You have to do your load before you can know what your equipment is.
Right.
You have to know what your equipment is in order to know what your duct sizes are going to be.
Right.
that means we can't use the duct sizes to do the load calculation. Otherwise, you're in a cyclical loop, right? You would do a load, you'd pick equipment, you'd do a duct design, and that would change your load, and that would change your equipment, and that would change your duct design, and that would change your load, and that would change your equipment, and that would change your duct design. And so, and the manuals are aware of this too. They wanted them to be standalone. So the Manual J has a tool for estimating what the surface area of the system will be and what the conduction loads will be and the leakage loads will be, et cetera. And because the actual duct layout happens later, people don't think about duct while they're doing a load calculation. It's just this brain disconnect that people are like, I'll worry about duct when it's time to do ducts. They forget to tell the tool that the ductwork is in the attic, or it's in a conditioned space, or it's in a crawl space, or it's R8, or it's R6, or it's leaky, or it's not leaky, and all of that stuff. And they don't notice, they don't use our fancy little pie chart because diagnosing load calculations is actually really easy in our tool and most other tools actually. Oh, where the hell did that go? Yeah, 3 screens, it turns out, is apparently one too many to know what's happening on your computer. So maybe I just won't be able to show it. But you can look at like a little pie chart, and it'll show you where the loads are coming from. And you go, okay, well, that's a big piece of pie. What's that? And it's the duct load, and it's because you have a basement, first floor, second floor, and you told all 3 floors the ductwork's in the attic. And in reality, it's only in the attic on the second floor. Or the load is, weirdly too low, and it's because you said the ductwork was in the conditioned space for the whole building, and it's all in the attic. It is the most commonly overlooked setting that people have. The other big reason that loads come out inaccurately is people go berserk with internal loads. They put people in every room. They put appliances in every room. They, and they have no concept of the snowball effect that causes.
Yeah.
And the third reason would be people just straight up cheating.
Yeah. Well, kind of with the cheating thing, I want to ask a question. I understand why we need a load calculation, but why can't we just change out the condenser and the evaporator of a system? Why? I mean, are we to assume always that the ductwork is not sized correctly? Are we to assume that, originally in the 80s they didn't size the equipment right? I mean, what's the need to do a load calculation?
I mean, it wouldn't be a bad assumption for starters. So
a lot of so I was just going to say, a lot of ductwork near me, a lot of the older homes are based on 70% efficient furnaces or whatever that run hot, low airflow, and no air conditioning. Right.
Yep. And then they shoehorn some air conditioning in there.
Yeah.
And they used R22 technology.
Yeah.
Right. The coil was like this little tiny thing, and it took, you didn't freeze it because somebody just went out and added gas to it, and it still worked fine, right? And so everything's, you don't know why it's working. You don't know what weird combination of fuck ups are causing this thing to not fail for X amount of years. And as soon as you change out some element of it, you're disturbing the crazy, weird balance of things that was causing this thing to work. Because there is no such thing as like for like. You're not replacing it with that tiny R22 coil. You're replacing it with this giant, hunk of aluminum, and you're putting a different chemical in it, and it doesn't react the same way to the same shitty airflow. Your fan motor is completely different, right? Before, the PSC motor with more resistance would modulate airflow lower and would use less electricity.
Hey,
right?
but I got a sale out of it, so what do I care?
Yeah. So we upgraded them to variable speed, and now it's blowing twice as much air over the thing, and it's already worse at removing moisture. And now with excess airflow, it's even worse at removing moisture. And the homeowner can't figure out why it's uncomfortable in their house, and they're turning the thermostat down to 65 degrees and constantly fighting about how cold it is in the house. And you created that problem because you didn't. So a load calculation isn't necessarily something in a retrofit situation that you are going to stick to and trust blindly. Right.
And that is exactly the answer that I was looking for. You know,
But it's the canary in the coal mine, though.
I
Right.
feel so excited because I just remembered
Yeah.
something that has to do with ductwork. I'm like, I can be part of this conversation because I have a story about ductwork.
tell us your story, Bill.
Went
Lay
to
it
the
on
bank
us.
today, right? This bank is an open floor plan. There's no walls that really separate anything. They have cubicles, right?
Yeah.
So you can see over top of the cubicles. One single cubicle, the branch manager, way over in the corner, she complains that it's always warmer in there than the rest of the building. So I'm like, all right, well, I go over there and temperature looks good, thermostat's satisfied and whatnot. And I go over there and it's a definitive at least 10-degree difference. It's definitely warmer over there. There's 3 more windows. You know, there's little tiny windows, but there's 3 more windows than the rest of the space. So I'm like, all right, maybe the duct fell off in the supply vent. Climb up in the ceiling, start checking on ductwork. And what I found, this is crazy to me, but what I found was all the other supply vents in the entire building are run off of a rooftop unit. That one single supply vent that I found out, it goes over to the corner of the wall, takes a left, it goes all the way to the other side of the building, then goes straight down. Then I found an air handler in the basement that, for whatever reason, handles just that one supply vent. It was the craziest thing. I'm like, well, there's your problem right there. I was like, I don't know how to fix it. I mean, what do you?
So that sounds like they were sick of the
What?
branch manager bitching, so they gave her own freaking unit.
Is that
Yeah, that does sound a
You
little.
know what
like-
you need? You need rights off because your ducts are all fucked up, lady.
But it's like, what do
That's
you
like-
what do you size? Do you size a unit to the house what it needs? Do you size it to the ductwork? Do you tell a homeowner you know it's
See,
a little
that's-
bit? Yep.
That is a great question. So when it comes to retrofit, I'm, you know, in theory, I'm not here, or at least in a professional role when I'm working for Right Top, I'm not here to answer that question for you. But I'm a huge believer in HVAC companies who specialize in retrofit starting to take a more whole house approach, right? And the understanding what your ductwork is capable of and whether or not it's replaceable is a good first step, or whether it's fixable, right? Because a lot of times I think the cheapest and most effective solution would be, if you could make reasonable upgrades to the duct system to make it work, right size the unit and fix that ductwork. But we know the problem is, we were actually talking about this before we started, about, you know, we wish builders would create access points for ductwork that gets sheetrocked into all these crazy places that they put ductwork. Right. Yeah. By the way, it's never going to happen. So,
No.
but so when you have a problem that would be just a crazy expensive and huge ordeal to fix, and you have to play the hand that you're dealt, I'm a big believer of trying to bring the load, you know, bring the mountain to Moses, right? Bring the load to your capabilities for airflow. Explore the options of, you know, could I add insulation? Could I, you know, make recommendations for, like, you know, window shading options? I've got a couple of, yeah. Sometimes you could, you know, like, we're going to close off some runs and put a mini split in, but like, it's never a cookie cutter situation, right? Like, I am super disbelieving of, and all due respect to some of the very smart people in the industry who are pitching the solution process. We have the secret to everything. This is what you have to do. You do this and you do this and you do this and you do. No, you just got to use your freaking brain and understand the problem, because
And I think it's about what the customer wants too. And I think that there's a lot of companies out there that are afraid to give the customers all the information. Look, we can change your system, but your ductwork isn't right. It's probably not going to be perfect. You know, nobody wants to tell the customer that, but that's the plain truth. I mean, unless we start from scratch, do a load calculation, blower door test, all this stuff, and then build the system from there. If you just want me to get it running tomorrow, you know, we're going to have to put some stuff in there. I mean, nobody likes this word, but we're going to have to make an educated guess. We're going to do our best to make it work, you know, and you're probably still going to have issues unless you want us to start from scratch.
That's what one of the reasons why I like the, you know, Nate Adams, Ted Kidd, and all the guys at HVAC 2.0, because they look at everything. So they have like a Venn diagram. And it's kind of like, your goal is to, you offer the customer two things. You want a like for like quote, free quote? Sure. Or do you want me to actually look at the whole house? I'm going to figure out what your house needs. I'm going to try to figure out what your budget is. And, you know, then we're gonna put everything together, and we're gonna see where all these lines cross, and boom, that's where we're gonna be able to work with, you know.
Now, Adam, I'm going to ask you a question, because when it comes to the customer, okay, as a consumer, right? I know air conditioning, but I'm not a salesman. I don't know what my budget is when I need something fixed. I don't have a budget.
Well,
I just want my shit fixed.
That's part of the process too. It's kind of like asking them a bunch of questions and trying to figure out what pains are you having in your house? Like, what bothers you? What, like, do you care that your airflow is blasting out of the vents and it's like crazy oversized and your ductwork's not proper? If you don't care that it's loud, well, then why would you pay to fix it? Right?
If you do
Now,
care, how much are
I'm
you
going to
willing
tell
to
you
pay?
something funny. In my house, my 4-ton system on 3 tons worth of ductwork on a single return that's maybe 14 by whatever, it's super small, is super loud. And my family actually can't sleep when the fan turns off because we're so used to the white noise. So that's something that if I changed my system in my house and redid the ductwork and made it all legit, my wife would lose her shit because she wouldn't be able to sleep.
Get an app for your phone.
White noise.
Right? Come on. That's what I use.
Change it. I refuse to change it.
Have a working HVAC system and get an app for your phone, for God's sake.
I swear
That is a terrible excuse.
I'm gonna make a
Shame
video
on
one
you.
of these days, like totally
That's funny.
showing, because I've told people many times how screwed up my system is. I straight have a freaking C clamp holding my filter down because I have a filter shoved into my air handler, and it pulls the filter up and bypasses it. So I have a freaking C clamp sitting on top of it.
See, I want to go from hydronics to forced air just because I'm tired of using my app for white noise.
I mean, I suppose you could also like maybe buy a fan. I don't know. Like these are
What?
These seem to be very solvable problems.
No, they dry out my throat when I have a fan running. Come on, dude. You're
All
not
right.
solving my problems here.
I wake up and my beard's like this, and I can't have that.
So,
Yeah.
Alex, do you have like, what is the best route people can take to learn the full Soft Universal? Like, if somebody's like, I want to learn how to do this start to finish, like, what's the best path for somebody to take?
So, shocker, sign up for one of our classes. It is, we start you off on the assumption that you've maybe seen a computer before, which is slightly different from, the way I used to do it 10 years ago. 10 years ago is like, here's the on button. Here's how you save a file. Here's, but we moved just a little ahead of that, and take you through explaining all of the whys, even for some of the simpler decisions, like choosing an outdoor temperature. It's one of the easiest things you can do in our tool. You find your state, you find your city, you click on it and you hit OK, and it should be done. But everybody freaks the hell out that you're in Houston, Texas, and you're designing at 95 degrees and not 100. And so we're going to have a 15, 20-minute conversation about why you need to be designing at 95 in Houston, Texas, and you need to relax, because if you design at 100, your system is only going to work the system only works for correctly 3 hours a year.
Mhm.
Nice job, which is the short answer to that particular question.
But
But
can't
we
you just two-stage
address all those
everything and
issues.
solve all those problems?
With two-stage, no. Variable capacity, maybe, but still no.
See, I was kind of looking into all the different, when you start digging into like the nuts and bolts and everything, sensible heat ratio, blah, 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 you're getting into duct design, all of that. I feel like the higher end equipment, they're given enough control where it kind of throws some of that out of the window. You know what I mean? Like, you're able to control humidity on variable speed, inverter equipment a little bit better, much better actually than just single stage equipment, stuff like that.
Absolutely.
It
Take someone that knows how to program that system correctly, right? Or are you saying that the system's algorithm can handle it all by itself?
So the problem with that is AHRI.
Yeah.
AHRI requires you to have certain default modes in order to be considered their test conditions, right? And you, the manufacturer, want your system to be rated with a very high SEER rating because it's a very good marketing tool and helps you sell your equipment. And that means your default mode can't be a moisture removal mode, because if your default mode is a moisture removal mode, it's running a super cold coil, and that's not very efficient. And so there are plenty of units right? Like there's supposedly like the secret switch on the Mitsubishi head that you can get it to prioritize humidity over temperature, but it's literally like you have to know the secret. Like it's not even a thing in the manual. Like you have to call tech support and know a guy, and like, you know, they give you the secret, you know, knock password to you know, jump whatever, you know, wiring you have to get it to do that. And the reason it's not just an easy touch the button, make it a thing, is because that is taken into account when they do AHRI ratings. And so if you're gonna put it in dry mode and it's gonna do this super cold coil thing, they're gonna include that in the ratings, and it's gonna lower your SEER points. And so you will find that a lot of those units can, in theory, do a pretty good job of that, but in practice they don't, because they're trying to maintain that SEER rating on the ride down. And so they're not trying to pull that coil temperature, because in order to do like an extra dehumidification, you need to reject heat outdoors, you know, faster than you're absorbing it, so that you can bring, I mean, you guys are gonna be way better at this than I am, by the way. I'm just knowledgeable enough about the refrigerant cycle that I can barely have these conversations, and you're going to start throwing superheat and subcool numbers at me, and I'm going to be like, yep, whatever you say. But the basic fundamentals of the cycle, you're going to reject the heat faster than you're absorbing it, so that you're pulling that evaporator temperature down to something colder, because that's ultimately what it takes to do moisture removal. And when you're doing that, you're using more energy, because it's all about the condensing unit. Right. When it comes to the energy usage of the system, the fan doesn't do dick. Right. It's the energy. It's the compressor that's eating up all the energy. Yeah. And so if you trick your compressor into just floating it, you know, right where it can, you get this awesome SEER rating. Right.
And I would say that it also too, it is the compressor, but it's the starting of the compressor, really. So if you can have longer run times, you're actually but then you have to fight with humidity removal and things like that. But longer run times, you're going to have less inrush on your compressor, and it's going to lower your peak inrush kind of thing. You know, I would imagine. I don't know how they factor.
There have been some. It's like there was some studies done in the 80s and 90s that showed short cycling drove cost of operation through the roof. And so that was just the going wisdom of the HVAC industry, right? Oversized systems are going to cost 25% more to operate. And people were building it into their operating cost models and things like that. And then they did some studies in the late 90s and early 2000s, and we're like, we're having real trouble replicating. The FSEC did some stuff, and they're like, we're having real trouble replicating this result. There was definitely a increase in cost, but it wasn't this dramatic thing that some earlier testing had shown. And so like, it's sort of watts is watts, BTUs is BTUs. Yeah. Kind of stuff. Now, wear and tear and comfort, and there's still a million reasons.
No, there's a whole bunch of different stuff.
But operating costs on pure electricity are not on the top of that list anymore.
So I kind of wanted to talk a little bit, and some people were asking about it in the chat too, about load calculations on commercial buildings, and the things that we have to be concerned about. Obviously with a commercial building, whether it be restaurants, whether it be, commercial spaces, offices, and things like that, you're going to have more people, right? So that's a factor for sure. You're going to calculate more people in an office, in a restaurant, and things like that.
Oh, yeah.
And then also you got to think about, like in restaurant situations, the heat load. You've got equipment, not only just infiltrating heat, you've got equipment generating heat. Now, you mentioned something that Wrightsoft does do commercial stuff earlier, maybe in our pre-chat. So do they do like is your software capable of doing load calculations on like office spaces and restaurants, or is restaurants? Yeah, that's interesting.
No, restaurants are actually one of the easier ones. The technology behind fire hasn't changed much in a couple million years. So when you're talking about how much heat it takes to operate a grill or a fryer or an oven, like we've had that down in the books since the 70s, and there's not a hell of a lot more. Induction cooktops are going to be where you're going to see some changes as those enter the commercial space, but that hasn't been something that has popped up, at least in the questions that come my way. So kitchens are actually in restaurants are some of the easier ones to do.
Now,
Offices are a huge pain in the butt because computer technology is constantly changing and evolving.
Yeah.
And so it's a little bit trickier.
Speaking of offices, so I kind of have a dumb question. As I don't know how well plotted out this curve is, but throughout the years, as people in general start getting fatter in this country, is that something you guys honestly have to take into consideration? Like,
so it's something the ASHRAE boards would have to take into consideration, and because that's where we get those numbers. And you know, as a fat guy myself, you know, that's actually usually one of my jokes. Yeah. These damn lights. That used to be one of my canned jokes is, you know, I would tell people it's 200 BTUs per person, depending on, you know, I'm probably about 400. And you know, that would be one of my dumb jokes in the class, but yeah, that's more of an ASHRAE board situation. And unfortunately, as much as, ASHRAE is very America focused. It is an international organization, so it might not be quite as skewed toward that as you might like. However, ask anybody in the energy sector about how we calculate commercial loads. There's a really old joke. Actually, I think I've used this on the HVA school. The really old joke. Ask an engineer what's 2 + 2, and they'll tell you 4, but let's call it 5 to be safe.
Yeah.
There's a lot of that. Yeah, there's a lot of that in the ASHRAE tables. So it's probably already sized for Alex Meaney proportioned people, just due to the sort of, you know, plus X percentage tendency for those kinds of ratings.
Yeah.
Well, one reason why I think it's great what you do, Alex, because I remember back in the day, I'm pretty sure there's a lot of guys out there too. When a customer used to call, oh, I have unit want to be replaced, blah, blah, blah. You didn't give them no options, okay? And you ask them right away, what's your square footage of your home?
Yeah.
Okay, so you need a this mile square foot. You know what? We're gonna add a half a ton just for humidity. Just I know you're in a zone, you know.
Yep.
So,
But
what do you say to the? Yeah. Go ahead.
Well, I was going to say the way that they got away with that was that the ductwork was undersized.
Yep.
And you had 10 SEER, 8 SEER equipment, so it was very forgiving.
Right.
And it could run its heart away and just run and run and run. You put on 18, 20 SEER, that's computer controlled, technological, freaking launching space shuttle crap, and properly sized ductwork, and all of a sudden, you know, you've got mold popping up in the ceilings and all kinds of crazy things. You know, I mean, once you start throwing a lot of this, and I think that goes back to, I can't remember if we were talking about it before the show or not. I was brought up rules of thumb. I was taught all kinds of rules of thumb, and the equipment was forgiving enough that, you know, and I've said this a million times, I was taught to charge air conditioners by pressure. That was it. That was it. I didn't consider indoor temperatures, outdoor temperatures, or anything. I just looked for a certain pressure, and if I couldn't get the number on an R22 air conditioner, I can still remember it. I was taught to, if my head pressure was 275 PSI, that my back pressure or my suction pressure should be 65 PSI. That was plain and simple the way that I was taught. And if it was cold outside, then I would block off the condenser, drive my head pressure up to 275, and I would add refrigerant or remove refrigerant, and it never worked, right?
Yeah.
As we get more efficient in our equipment, you know, as technology evolves and you have computer controlled equipment that has thermistors everywhere, that's, you know, checking discharge temperature and all kinds of different things, we can't use those rules of thumb anymore. And we, you know, create more problems by, and that's also where I was kind of going at earlier with my question, but putting retrofit equipment onto an existing ductwork system, that's where you're really going to start hitting issues. You put an ECM motor where you think, oh yeah, this thing's going to last forever, you know, and you put it on some crappy ductwork and you're going to have some problems, you know. I think that our industry is getting better at paying attention to things, but we still have a lot of old school mentality that we need to throw out the door and, you know, really start sizing things correctly. And that's where software like this is really going to come in handy in making sure that equipment is sized correctly, you know, and in our comfort needs. And, you know, like what Adam's been going about too, he's been exploring the area of, indoor comfort and really finding out what the customer wants. It's all intriguing to me. The industry is definitely going to a good place, with all this new technology.
But
it's just a matter of getting the old school people to change their mindset.
on that point, though, so when my dad sold his company, I worked for the new owners for a few months after he sold it. And he would size his equipment. They sold Bryant. And I guess Bryant or Carrier had some load calculation software. And I was going to ask you about this, Alex. Writes off compared to some of these programs where it's like you type in the address and it tells you the load. And he would base everything off of that. And he would show up at the job with his equipment. I'm like, what are you thinking, dude? And
He's like, well, you made no modifications to the house whatsoever since
no,
you
he's
moved
like,
in?
he's like, it's all public data, and it's the
Well,
load.
some of it's public data. Address equals load calculation is, in my opinion, one of
Spot
the
on.
worst things
Oh,
that happened in the HVAC industry. The people that brought it to the industry are doing their due diligence these days. I used to throw a real shady eye toward them, but these days there is at least a little bit more of an emphasis on not just putting an address and taking the number and running with it. Like there is some actual user interface involved, and really, if you have certified software, right? If you have certified Manual J software, it means all the inputs are in there, right? The only problem I have is when, it's like this thing I preach, look it up, right? The RTFM thing that the HVAC school guys love to say. Huge fan of that. Because if you look things up, you will find out what they're bad at, right? When we're talking products, your TM is not who you should expect to tell you what a piece of equipment is bad at doing, right? They're selling the product. They only tell you what's good about it, right?
Or your contractors.
Yeah. And so, so when you have some salespeople or people who are like sort of drumming up business for some of these address-based products, because we have one, and the difference between us and some of the others is we're being very careful to control the message of it starts with the address and then you do the following work, right? It's when somebody tells you all you need is an address, and you don't have to visit the site and you don't have to look at diddly squat. That's where I like lose my mind. Like it is a giant step in the wrong direction for the industry. But the people who, because it's not just the companies themselves, we sometimes lose control of that very message. We have, it's Right Mobile Consultant goes by a bunch of different names. Actually the first company to go address equals load calc is Design Star. But they went out of business and we took on the name. They went out of business because it was, well, let's not get into why they went out of business, but it's a Ream Rude product, and Ream Rude came to us and said, we want to still have this thing. It's great. And it sells boxes because you've got that load calculation check mark. And we had some trouble early on with territory managers saying, all you need is the address. And, we're like, no. Here's a bunch of videos. This is what you're supposed to do with it. You can start with it, but you have to do some work. So I don't care if your tool is using Google Maps or if it's measuring things from, you can't see what's underneath that roof line. You have to go to the job site. That's my personal opinion. I know what's in that tax record data. It's square footage. That's all it is, and that's not good enough. But if you are using a tool that encourages you to verify information, I say, and it's got a Manual J certification, I say have at it.
Yeah.
I am not someone who says the numbers that come out of Wrightsoft's products are better than the numbers that come out of our competitors' products. We're all using the same damn math, right? There's a book. It has to do what it says in the book, right? And if it's not doing what it says in the book, if you have quote unquote better math and you're using unapproved math, you shouldn't be doing that. So if you're certified software, the inputs are right, the outputs are right. what you want to look for is a tool that allows you to easily manipulate important inputs, and something that, you know, isn't claiming that it's done it for you. And then you look at it with just a little bit of a critical eye and realize there's a million exceptions to these rules, and it's going to bite me squarely in the ass very quickly. You want a tool that, you know, that provides an easy path to verifying the information. And a lot of them are getting there, or are there already. Like, we've got some good competition out there.
Yeah.
So I'm out of curiosity. I don't think this question's a bad question, but you know, I live in California. We don't know what humidity is. You could very easily oversize something and get away with it. You might run into some issues, but you're not going to run into humidity issues. Now, when you come onto the East Coast, Florida especially, you know, I don't even think contractors are allowed to even say the word mold due to, you know, legal reasons and stuff. You know, it's
I think that's a myth, but yes,
is it okay? All right, yeah. But so, how many? I don't know if you can answer this, but I mean, how many contractors do you get that don't understand how to use your software, that oversize or undersize equipment? I mean, do you get a lot of people that don't take your classes that complain to you guys
about,
you know, like try to use your software and then say, oh, I didn't size it right or whatever? I mean, do you guys have to deal with that a lot?
Yeah. Oh, constantly. Yeah. In fact, it's it turned into a very big part of my job. The people at my corporate overlords keep threatening me with like sales positions.
Corporate overlords.
Yeah, I have corporate overlords. Trust me. They keep threatening me with sales like positions because it turns out that being Writes-Off's trainer is a big old sales job.
Gotcha.
Because I think what, you know, if I'm allowed to brag on myself for a minute, what I'm really good at is, and it wasn't difficult. I started with the assumption that people don't take pride in bad work, so that when they say I do it this way and it works, they've got to be right somehow, right? They're not just lying, right? That's crazy. So you start with the assumption
why it's worked out, but you got to find that reason.
That's
because of some weird ass thing that just, like you said earlier, it just worked out. Or
oversized, underducted.
Yeah.
We were using, you know, this worked fine when it was ECM, you know, whatever it is, you dig a little deeper, and you don't start the conversation with you're doing it wrong, right? You start the conversation with that's probably right, but can we look at why that's right?
Okay,
and
so
dig a little deeper.
You and I need to talk, because I just say you're a dumbass and you're doing it wrong, and then you get at it. So
yeah, that's like, you know, that's, you know, that's the equivalent of telling people how stupid they are on Facebook. It hasn't changed a single mind since somebody stared doing it, you know, 100 years, you know, what I said.
So we're not supposed to engage the trolls.
Yeah, exactly. Like or don't become one, right? Like telling people they're stupid and they're wrong.
Yeah, that's true.
You can't scream at somebody until they realize how dumb they are. It's not
going to happen. Yeah.
They're psychologically
not going to happen on this.
Yeah.
So how
it's like Facebook gave the dumb the ability to form like the Destructicon robot. Like they all just join up together, and they're
haven't they though?
They're like this immobile. They're this immovable force now, just like a mountain of the dumb.
Yeah.
Destructicon, that was like the ultimate Transformer robot.
Destructicon, that's the one.
Decepticon, I thought. No.
What's that?
No.
I don't know.
No, he's got it. It's Destructico. They were the little job site to like the backhoe and the bulldozer, and
gotcha.
Put them into the big one. Yeah.
So
no idea what you guys
how often
we're showing our age as people of the 80s that played with Transformers all the time. So
yeah, man.
Oh, that's my dinosaurs.
We were just talking about all, you know, different contractors that tell you your software is not working and whatever, blah blah blah. So my question is, how often? What is the percentage, roughly, obviously just off shooting from your hip, but what's the percentage of people that come to you and the equipment is oversized versus undersized? How often do you find somebody that says, this is not undersized?
It's almost never undersized.
Yeah.
It's almost never undersized. Underducted, right? But it's almost never undersized.
Let me ask you something.
I would put an asterisk on that. Commercial work is very detail oriented. all of those internal loads you were talking about, the people and the
Yeah.
appliances and everything like that, you could miss a big thing. Like you could miss the lighting.
Oh, I'll tell you, one of the biggest things you're going to miss in commercial, especially if you're coming from residential, is fresh air. You know, economizers, minimum outside air, building air balance. Those are all huge.
Well, and our software has code minimum stuff for a lot of those things built in.
Yeah.
But code minimum, man, like that's, you know,
Code minimum is
that doesn't mean
that
doesn't mean what
doing.
that's what they're actually doing,
Yeah.
right? So in commercial, I've seen a little bit of the undersizing problem, but in residential, everybody's got a gut feeling, and
they go with it.
It's never too small,
Yeah.
right? People very rarely are going, no, I can do this with a 3-ton when they did the math and came out 4. Like it always goes the other direction. With there are obviously exceptions, but they're few and far between.
Let me ask you again a question. You know, I don't understand the residential side as much, but so you do a load calculation and you look at required airflow for each room, right? And what I tend to find, and even you know, the heat load, right? Typically, a frustration of mine is you find that there's less options when it comes to heating systems. Now I know we have variable systems now, but what I tend to notice again as a commercial guy on the resi side is you know, you're going with, you know, a furnace that's, you know, what, 60,000 BTUs or 100,000 BTUs. You know, is there a lot
80 in there?
Is there an 80 in there? Okay.
Yeah.
So it seems like there's less options though. And it almost seems like we, you know, I guess with variable
that's because it's kind of hard to F it up.
Yeah.
Right. You know, going back to the dry climate question, right? There's no question, by the way, that in a dry climate, it gets a lot harder to F it up.
Yeah.
In fact, the new Manual S is going to have a separate set of rules for homes that have it's called a JSHR, the Manual J Sensible Heat Ratio of the load, not the unit. If it's above 95%, right? If less than 5% of your load is moisture, you get a different set of rules you can play by.
Gotcha.
And that's I think long overdue. Heating is always like that, right? You're doing one job, you're raising temperature. That's like it's the one thing you have to do. And if you've got some short cycle, it's still going to raise the temperature, right? So those now that's not to say you shouldn't attempt to size right. It's not to say that you shouldn't, but the increments that we have, as clunky as they may be, I think the only problem with availability of heating equipment is fan settings for pairing it with the cooling equipment.
And that's kind of where I was going, because you know, you need this certain amount of airflow to move heat across the heat exchanger in the heating mode, but then you need this large amount of airflow to move. So I guess that's where variable.
Sometimes it's small.
Yeah, I guess that's where variable equipment really comes in play, because then you have the ability to modulate, right?
Yeah, I found that a lot with the constant torque motors, that you don't have a wide range of airflow settings.
I'm having some real trouble with that. Yeah. Sorry to
No.
I stepped all over you just there.
It's all good.
But the you're right. The constant torque, non-variable stuff. You look at it, it's like 7 speeds, right? There's 3 of them usable for cooling, maybe, right? And that same unit, it's the same blower for 1.5, 2, and 2.5. Right. And I've got 3 friggin' speed settings on the thing. You know, oh, it's a 7 speed. Yeah. 4 of them are constant are recirc. Right. Like 4 of those 7 speeds are effing useless to me. I have to choose between 3, and I have to have and I'm dealing with a CFM range that's easily 350 to 400 CFM top to bottom. And I've got 3 speeds to go from there to there. It gives me very little wiggle room when I'm trying to make little adjustments to get the latent right or something like that. And it feels to me like even back when, it was PSC, I had a little more control over that, right? Like it feels like is it me, or are there fewer motor options now that everything is ECM?
Yeah, I mean, I do remember selling Train, and I did a big apartment complex. It was like almost 300 units, and it was small. There was, the cooling was 1.5 tons, right? But we had the special order furnaces to get a 2-ton drive on it because everything was 3-ton drive sold from the distributor. It's like these are all too big.
Well, that's a little bit about your location.
Yeah,
Train makes them. It's not like they custom built them in Tyler. They sell the crap out of those in Texas, but your local distributor doesn't. I had to special order the furnace for my house. Same thing. Because quote unquote, nobody needs a 40,000 BTU furnace in Massachusetts. Like bullshit. Like, of course I need a 40,000 BTU furnace. Like, and my house is 100 years old. I weatherized it, but like it didn't, it cost me like, I don't know, it cost me like $6,000 or something to get this house to a point where I needed a 40,000 BTU furnace.
$6,000.
well, it's kind of interesting.
Everything's expensive in Massachusetts.
Bill, you should go over.
man.
So we did the Nate Adams came out to Bill's house, did a blower door, did the load calculation, used his utility bills and all that on Bill's house. Bill, what's the square footage of your house?
2,100.
2,100. Your blower door was like 5,500 CFM 50 or something like that. It was
The worst one you ever seen. That's all I remember.
It was bad. So, but anyways, his house.
I thought that wasn't too bad.
His house, it was pretty bad. His house recovered from being freaking freezing where my feet were hurting because the floors were so cold while we were running the blower door. In like, what was it, a half hour, 45 minutes? It was back up to 70.
And that's with my hydronic system being bastardized, where they've taken out radiators and put in baseboards. Some rooms they've taken out radiators and haven't put anything. And like I was looking to have my house completely spray foamed after Nate told me I can't spray foam it myself with the little cans of spray foam from Lowe's. He's like, you got to have a professional do it.
You could do board and what do they call it? Board and there's a nickname for it. You could buy rigid foam board and window paint it in there with the cans.
Nate told me he couldn't, so now Nate's a liar to Bill.
Why did Nate say you couldn't do that?
Because he's a jerk.
Stop it.
Don't get me in trouble with Nate. I understand that's a doable thing.
But
I was thinking about just doing the foam board, like when I have my house resided, for example, taking it all the way down to the wood, putting foam board up, residing over it.
I mean, that's the dream. That's the way you want to do it.
That's why I'm doing it. Then you hear that, Nate?
I mean, but you have to do it. You have to go crazy with it. Like the Canadians do that sometimes. In Canada, they will just move all of the insulation to the exterior of the building, but they're putting like 6 inches of insulation out there. Like you have to get that insulation high enough.
Yeah.
You've got to get it high enough that you're not going to be creating condensation problems. Right. So when I say you can use board insulation and foam frame around it, you have to be able to get a certain thickness in there. And if your house is old enough that it's like 3-inch walls or something, I mean, shit, you can. What is it? The
2 inches.
The Owens Corning product. The board. Exo something or I don't know what it is, but it's this pink board stuff. It's 5.5 per inch. You can get it to R17 in there, which a lot of the experts say is just short of what you need, but like by an R2. I wouldn't officially recommend it, but I would do it in my house.
Yeah, no kidding. What I want to ask you, what do you recommend for the guy or the business owner who's starting to do this load calculation? Because I know I'm not a big advocate for guys saying, "Oh, I have so much experience, 30 years, blah blah," but they're still not doing load counts. But I think for experience for load calculation, you need experience because you could compare different scenarios you had. So, how can you say to a guy who's just starting up and started doing load counts, like what are some of the tips you could give the guy? Like how can he, let's say like a contractor comes up to him and asks and tries to not pick a fight, but argue an argument. Yeah, go ahead.
Well, who are they getting an argument with here in this scenario?
Anybody, homeowners, contractors saying, well, we always use that, or we could do this instead.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? They don't have.
So with both of those, all right. So number one, I would say keep an open mind, right? Don't blindly trust, all systems are subject to the GIGO rule, right? Garbage in, garbage out.
Gotcha.
So if you're not putting the right information in, then there's good reason not to trust the result, right? So if you come out with something that looks blatantly incorrect, the answer isn't, this is stupid, I shouldn't be doing this. The answer isn't, I'm going to go and do what I was going to do anyway. The answer is, figure out what's going on here. What happened? What caused this to be so far off of what I thought it was going to be, and reconcile those things, right? Mm-hmm. Which means, you're probably because the answer probably isn't your gut, and the answer probably isn't the number that you made your first, it came out of your first load calculation in an unfamiliar tool. But get some help. Any decent company has got people like me who will help you in those situations,
right?
And help you reconcile those things. But also, understand that HVAC systems are systems. They are large, complex systems. The load calculation tells me, this is something I say all the time. Load calculations do not tell you what size equipment you need in your house. Load calculations tell you how much heat comes in the building, how much heat leaves the building, and how much moisture comes in the building. It gives you 3 very useful numbers, but that does not become that. There's no such thing as a ton. There's no such thing as I have these 3 numbers, therefore it must be this size system, because I have an airflow that's going to go with that. I have controls that go with this. I have I have to look at the performance of the system. If I'm in California with a very dry condition and my indoor return air wet bulb is 59 degrees, I lose 20, or not 20, I lose 15 to 20%. 20 would be high, but 15% of my system's capacity, just because of how dry it is, right? Yeah. And then if I go to Palm Desert, I go to some place where it's 105 outside, now I've lost 20% or 25% of my system's capacity. And we look it up on AHRI and we go, oh, this is a 33,000 BTU unit. Bullshit it is, right? You put it in and you've got 28,000 BTUs coming out of it, right? The load is a great place to start, but it's only a start. And that I think is I think can help build confidence, right? Because when something, again, is whenever you're butting heads with something that you quote unquote know, the reaction is usually well, this is wrong. Well, all right, well, what if I said maybe you're not wrong and maybe it's not wrong, but there's something in the middle where you can work this out. And if that journey takes you through how the friggin' thing works. Right? Stop telling me it has to be this many per ton, or it has to be this, stop telling me that it's these random rules that work across the board in every single situation. One size fits all doesn't work ever. Now tell me it's because, of evap temperatures and airflow and the things that make the thing go. Okay. Right. You show me a chart, you show me some data, you show me something where we're no, this is what the performance thing says. All right, we're having the right conversation, but I've been doing this 30 years. That's great. They change the technology every 5 years on you, right?
This 30 years.
Your experience from 30 years ago is not the most relevant, today. They don't use the same insulation, they don't use the same windows, they bury in the ductwork, they do you got to stay on it.
Yeah. I want to ask you a question. We're going to wrap this up soon, but do you guys, I don't know if you can answer this, but I guess this is a fair question. Do you guys have to, I know you want to be precise with your load calculations with the numbers that you generate, but don't you guys have to account for people making mistakes, for people not installing everything correctly? Do you guys have to account for that?
We don't, right? Okay. Because...
Well, and I understand why you don't. You're giving the information. You're assuming that people are doing their job right, but there's got to be a huge margin of error there of people not doing their job right.
Right. So, and that's why I tell people the load doesn't tell you what size equipment to put in.
Got it.
Right.
That makes sense.
It tells you how much heat's coming in the building, how much moisture's coming in the building, how much heat's leaving the building, and then you look at the crazy delivery system that they have, which is cobbled together from baseboards and radiators and a whole lot of nothing.
Yeah.
And you plan around it, right? I have this useful piece of information, but if you're gonna do retrofit work, you have to, you can't just play by a simple procedure. You have to understand how everything works and how this will affect that. It's like whack-a-mole, right? I mean, this one pops up and you take care of that, and then this problem pops up, and like you have to understand those things to be good at your job. But if you're not constantly analyzing why it works and thinking about why, you know, you could be a great technician today and suck in 5 years.
That's why you got to stay curious.
That's right. Yeah. Because
All right,
again,
cut it in the show.
We've solved it.
Yep.
Boom.
But yeah, if you're not always asking yourself, why does this work? You're not progressing, you're not understanding, you're not, you know, and you're not ready for the next time they change shit on you.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Right? Like they make changes to the plumbing code. They make changes to the electrical code. They've made a few serious changes to the electrical code a few times over the last few years, but not like in HVAC. Right.
No, they change everything, and it's not just. I mean, it's everything. I mean, our refrigerants are changing every day, and that's why, you know, people, they'll ask me questions all the time. You know, what's the pressure of this? What's your favorite refrigerant? What's all this? And it's, guys, the flavor of the day is the flavor of the day, and it's going to change tomorrow. Like, you know, we're here to be mechanics. We need to understand how to do our job, and it doesn't matter, insert name of refrigerant or new whatever. We're problem solvers. We're going to have to figure things out and evolve with this. It's tomorrow is going to be something new, you know, every day. Someone asked me, you know, what refrigerants are being, we're going off of your area expertise, but someone said, what refrigerants are being, you know, banned or, you know, taken out of the picture. And I said, basically every refrigerant out there is going to be gone tomorrow. So
it's all got an expiration date.
Yeah, it's all got an expiration date. And, you know, the flavor of the month right now is CO2, propane. Okay, well, they're bitching about CO2 in the atmosphere. Propane, they got to drill for oil to get that. So they're bitching about, I mean, everything's changing every day. So, you know, if the yuppie people had their way, we wouldn't have any. So, you know, there's always going to be something new. We just got to evolve and be ready for it.
Could just use water as a refrigerant.
But water, they'll find a reason to ban water too. So that's probably harmful to the ozone or something.
It hurts the water's feelings.
Yeah. Alex, go ahead. I was gonna say, before we wrap this up, is there anything that you wanted to promote? Is there anything you want to talk about that we haven't asked you about yet before we wrap?
No, when it comes to this kind of stuff, I am a rising tide floats all boats kind of a guy.
Gotcha.
You know, I mostly come on these shows and do the social media thing as a way of promoting people making that leap, right? From being someone who doesn't necessarily do load calculations to someone who does. And I want to make it, you know, obvious and clear that there are people at our organization who will help you on that journey, and hopefully that wins a few people to come over to us. But, you know, if I lose you to one of our competitors, but you're stepping up your game, that's awesome. We are sort of in an enviable position that if you want to do all elements of HVAC design, we're one of only basically 2 companies that can do that. And we do it sort of in a obviously better way, I think, in terms of user interface. So basically, if I can get you on that path, I'll meet you somewhere on the road.
Yeah.
So, you know,
if people want to reach out to you, how do they get a hold of you? They go to your website. What's the
just go to rightsoft.com.
Okay.
You
guys have like training. Are you guys doing training yet?
So, this is our slow time for training. I'm wrapping up our last training of the season. Our fall schedule hasn't been posted. We suffered a disruption to our training schedule the last couple months. I'm very bummed about it. I would much rather be doing that than what I've had to been doing the last few months. We had some illnesses and one retirement that came sort of suddenly that caused literally all within the same like 2 weeks. So it threw a monkey wrench in a lot of our schedule, and so there might be some people out there who've been dying for training. First of all, if you are, reach out to us, reach out to tech support, reach out to myself. We will get you through this. We have some materials that we can send you to do that if you can't make a live training and you've been looking for one. But coming in the fall, we're going to have our regular schedule, or who knows? Maybe something new. We're exploring some interesting options that we're hoping to launch next year, but they're not on. I didn't bring them up to you guys because they're not at a stage where we know exactly what that's going to look like.
That's cool. Fair enough.
Yeah.
So you guys are looking to hire more bald bearded guys?
If you know one, we have a few more qualifications we need than that, but it doesn't hurt.
Oh well, yeah.
But about half the team looks like some version of me on a like the evolution of man.
How long, just so people know what they're getting into, if they want to take the Rights Off journey to learn Rights Off Universal, how long does the training take to go through?
So it's about 20 hours to get the fundamentals right, but it's so different, man. It's all about what you're bringing to the table, right? So if you know what manual J and manual D and manual S entail by hand, and you've used design tools on your computer, and you are comfortable playing around with something, you almost don't need me, right? And I don't like touting that point, because the people who do need me and need me a lot hate hearing that. It's really frustrating when somebody goes, "This is easy," and you're over here struggling with it. So we downplay that, but that is a real experience that people have. People are like, "This is so intuitive," and and then there are people who are like, "There's no way anybody could figure this out without 100 hours of training," and that's more of an initial reaction. If you calm down and walk through it with us, it's about 20 hours, and we have a really, really high success rate of people who do take that 20 hours of training, and then you gotta make yourself do it, right? And that's the hard part. Actually, you take 20 hours out of your work schedule in a month, and then you gotta not fall into the trap of making up those 20 hours and putting off using the tool for a month. Because if you do that, then all the things that you learned, go dormant, and it's really difficult to. That's actually why we're probably not going to go back to the in-person training space. There are people who are super bummed about it, and I'm actually kind of one of them, because I like to be able to see everybody's faces when I'm teaching. Like, I used to joke that I'll just keep talking until everybody's face goes from doing this to doing this, and then then I knew I was done explaining. But the fact that we can record the material and people can go back to it as much as they want for a year, that's what we do now.
Yeah,
has been with all the advantages of being in person, you can't beat that. You can't. Like, so
you reference it anytime you want.
Yeah, it's pretty helpful. So yeah, it's probably about a 20 hour plus another maybe 10 hours of good practice investment to get comfortable, and then who knows to get proficient. I mean, if you believe Malcolm Gladwell, it's 10,000 hours, right? I mean, like,
Yeah.
What's proficient? But that journey is wildly variable, so I don't like to make promises about that. And I apologize for the long answer right at the end for what seemed like a softball question. I went on a rant, but that one's
oh my god, it's like he's very
rants are
difficult.
always the best, dude. I do those all the time. You always get the best information out of a rant. So
It felt like 20 hours.
right.
shut up. All right, cool. Well, Alex, thank you so much for coming on here, dude. It's been awesome. We
Yeah, it's
really
been my pleasure.
appreciate it. Adam, I think it's time to hit that button.
All right, see ya.
Yeah.
See ya.